Good morning, everyone. It's um, it's good to see you all here. Some of you may have signed on early and heard the beautiful chanting of the monastics at Plum Village that we played. We've been talking about, I guess, chants, rituals, ways of keeping the Buddha in mind, and I thought we would talk about probably one of the most practiced rituals and chants in Buddhism across all traditions. And that is remembering the three refuges: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So there's this element of refuge taking in Buddhism. So what does it mean? Well, refuge, refugare, to flee back, to run back to safety, to return to a safe place. About a week ago, we were doing our morning meditation, and my cushion is set up so I'm facing a window onto the front yard. And toward the beginning of the meditation period, my eyes were half closed, and there was movement, quick movement in my visual field. And being a mammal, I was drawn to that. We tend to draw our attention to what moves around us, especially if it's moving fast. So I opened my eyes further, and there were two squirrels playing under the ash tree. I call it playing. They were chasing one another. I don't know why they do this, but it's a common behavior that I'm sure you've all seen. So having investigated that, I went back. My eyes were half closed. And then it was probably less than a minute later, there was a bigger movement, a faster movement. So once again, my attention was drawn to that, and I opened my eyes further in time to see a fox with one of the squirrels dangling from its mouth. We have a family of foxes in our neighborhood. And then the fox went trotting across the street to some bushes with the squirrel in its jaws. The other squirrel ran up the tree. And it occurred to me that that might be part of why squirrels do this chasing play, to hone their skills for survival, to be able to run quickly from a pursuer. But foxes are capable of catching squirrels. Now, dogs, try as they might, usually aren't. They just aren't fast enough or stealthy enough to catch a squirrel, but foxes can. as can raccoons. So that image of the fox with the squirrel dangling from its mouth was with me for the rest of the meditation period and periodically since. And it occurred to me that we're all in this situation, like the squirrels, of not knowing when, at any moment, a fox may appear. And as the Talking Heads song goes, you may find yourself dangling from the jaws of a fox. And for humans, that would tend to be things like a sudden illness, an accident, some financial predicament, loss of a loved one, some relational crisis or another, or some social or political or economic chaos. So at any moment, we all know that we may find ourselves dangling from the jaws of a fox. And since we have this knowledge, since we have this awareness, there's always a certain, in human existence, there can be a certain background dukkha, a background stress, just the awareness that such things may happen. Now, of course, sometimes the dukkha comes to the foreground and something does actually happen. Now, most of the time, most of the things we tend to worry about, at least it's been my experience, don't happen, or at least they don't happen when we expect them to. On the other hand, sometimes things happen that we just weren't expecting at all. So religions generally provide some means of refuge, some means of achieving a sense of safety or comfort in an unpredictable world. In the Buddhist tradition, this comes in the form of refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So that when things happen and the usual suspects of fear, regret, anger, despair, pain, physical or mental, arise, there is a refuge. The Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. This is a very early teaching of the Buddha, and I'll read from the Dhammapada a couple short verses that go together. These sections from the sayings of the Buddha go like this. They go to many a refuge, to mountains and forests, to park and tree shrines, people threatened with danger. That's not the secure refuge. not the supreme refuge. That's not the refuge having gone to which you gain release from all suffering and stress. But when, having gone to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha for refuge, you see with right discernment the Four Noble Truths: stress, the cause of stress, the transcending of stress, and the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the stilling of stress. That's the secure refuge. That's the supreme refuge. That is the refuge having gone to which you gain release from all suffering and stress. So what is the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha? Well, I think that's complicated. And I think one reason it's complicated is that one's understanding of it changes over time. It can be very simple, or it can be very ethereal. But one way of looking at it is that the Buddha is an example for us of someone who met many conditions with equanimity, was able to maintain a sense of compassion and wisdom in stressful circumstances. So the Buddha, as we picture him, is an example, an exemplar for us. And the Dhamma is his teachings, the guide that he provided to give us some markers along the way to help us. And the Sangha are our spiritual friends. Now, initially, the Sangha referred to the fellow monastics, the fellow disciples of the Buddha. But now, 2,500 years later, and practicing as a lay person, I think of them as spiritual friends, whether they're Buddhist or not. People who are supportive of my highest aspirations. And these various chants and rituals, the bowing, meditation practice itself, are a way of keeping the Buddha in mind. And in different traditions, they're practiced in different ways. And some of them are practiced privately as part of a daily practice, and others in public when there can be a service and many people can attend. But they're all ways of keeping the Buddha in mind. There is a chant that I think is probably one of the most universal chants in Buddhism. And I'll see if I can bring this up. It's relatively short and memorizable. It's in the Pali language, and sometimes there are different styles of chanting. I first heard this at a Zen retreat And it had a particular, it was used at the end of each day after a full day of talks, meditation, noble silence. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. I go, Gacchami, to the Buddha, Buddham, for refuge, Saranam. So I go to the Buddha for refuge. And I go to the Dharma for refuge. I go to the Sangha for refuge. And it was chanted like this. And you can feel free to chant along with me, although I wish we could all do this together with the microphones unmuted, but that in Zoom creates chaos because it's always trying to figure out who the speaker is, and it produces an unpleasant effect. So if you do chant along, I just ask that you have your microphone muted. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. So there are other ways of chanting that. Some of them on the that you might encounter in YouTube videos use more of a chant in a minor key, which I find sort of vaguely disturbing. So I like that way of chanting that particular verse. So we have these chants, rituals, just ways of remembering, ways of keeping the Buddha in mind, really ways of getting back to our highest aspirations. Now, when people are in distress, there are all kinds of refuges they seek, and maybe during the discussion period you can suggest some refuges that you see people seeking in times of stress. Or maybe what are your ways of keeping your highest aspirations in mind? So I'll stop there and see if there are any comments or suggestions, questions. Thank you so much.